Yes, sir.
Good morning, everyone. This is the November 20th, 2024 meeting of the Board of Estimates. It's now called to order. For those of you who are joining us today in person, we ask you to ensure that your electronic devices are turned off or at a minimum placed on silent so you do not disrupt today's proceedings. For those of us who are streaming and participating with us virtually, if there is an opportunity for you to present to the board today, we're going to ask that you state your name, organization you're calling in from, and then speak loudly and clearly when the board recognizes you. At this time, I'm going to ask our amazing clerk, Ms. Celeste Amato, for any corrections, additions, or noted abstentions to today's agenda. Madam Clerk, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, everyone. We do have a few things to read into the opening statement this morning. We have the following corrections to note for the board. SB 2414113, this is for the City Council grant agreement to the Harbor Group Association, Inc., for $250,000. Under background explanation, we are striking $50,000 and inserting the correct amount, which is $250,000. SB 2413343, Department of Transportation. This is an emergency procurement request to perform emergency snow removal services for the winter 2023-2024 season. And I am going to be reading some new language into this item. Under background and explanations, we're correcting this memo to read the following. On 12/5/23, the Department of Transportation received approval of an emergency procurement request. Upon approval, DOT entered into emergency agreements with 7 bidders found non-compliant by SMBAD. The department is now requesting to again enter into snow emergency agreements with the same contractors while the Bureau of Procurement goes through the solicitation process. This will allow DOT to secure contractors for the upcoming winter season in a timely manner. The agreements will be for 2 years or until the Bureau of Purchases completes their process. SB 2413984 for the Department of Public Works. This is Amendment 2 to Agreement with EBA Engineering, Inc. In action start date, we are deleting 11/20/24 and inserting 2/24/2026. And in action end date, we're deleting 11/19/2025 and inserting 2/24/2027. And SB 2414250 for the council, proposed resolution on pilot agreements for the Board of Estimates. This does not have a dollar amount associated. In the background explanation, we are striking the language prior to the approval of any payment in lieu of taxes. Agreement for affordable housing, members of the board must receive the following. And inserting prior to the approval of any payment in lieu of taxes agreement for affordable housing, members of the board through the pilot committee process and the Baltimore City Council must receive the following. We're also striking under Section I, a detailed inspection report from the Department of Housing and Community Development assessing current habitability conditions at the site of the project, and inserting the language under Section I, all applicable inspection and appraisal reports related to project funding and financing sources and most recent multifamily dwelling license inspection reports. For walk-ons this morning, we do have a few. They are as follows. SB 2414640 for the Bureau of Procurement. This is a rejection of all bids for the Department of Transportation Parking Enforcement. Solicitation B50006437. This item has been walked on at the request of the Comptroller. For SB 2414411 for the Bureau of Recreation and Parks, this is a transfer of funds for RP 23802, Bocheck Gym Edition. This has been walked on at the request of the administration, and the action is that the board is requested to approve a transfer and allocation of funds in the total amount of $5,145,000. And this is associated with the award of contract RP 23802 for the Bocheck Gym Edition to the Plano Kudon LLC contract. And the final walk-on is SB 2414314 for Recreation and Parks. This is the Elijah Cummings Recreation Center Award. This is walked on at the request of the administration, and the action is as follows. The board is requested to approve an award to Banneker THGJV LLC for RP 24812. Congressman Elijah Cummings Recreation Center. The period of the agreement is based on board approval with a duration of 540 days. This transaction amount is $15,660,190. We have no deferrals to note this morning. We have the following withdrawals to note. SB 241378, Bureau of Procurement. This is an award selected source for the Health Department for diapers for $234,648. This item has been withdrawn at the request of the agency. And SB 2414201 for the Department of Housing and Community Development, condemnation or redemption of the fee simple interest in 705 East Preston Street, Block 1155, Lot 17. The dollar amount is $280. This item has been withdrawn at the request of the agency. We do not have any protests or statements to note this morning. The following items will be heard as part of the non-routine agenda this morning. SB 2414433 for the Department of Audits. This is a biennial performance audit of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood and Safety Engagement for fiscal years ending June 30, 2023 and June 30, 2022. SB 2414250 for the City Council, proposed resolution on pilot agreements for the Board of Estimates. SB 2414149 for the Law Department, Susan Goodlaxon et al. Versus Mayor and City Council of Baltimore. This settlement is in the amount of $44 million. SB 2414076 for the Bureau of Procurement. This is a fifth extension for parking enforcement for $735,000. SB 2413343, Department of Transportation Emergency Procurement Request for emergency snow removal services for winter 2023 through 2024 for $2,705,620. And SB 2414640 for the Bureau of Procurement. This is a rejection of all bids for B506437. We have the following abstentions to note this morning. The Honorable Mayor Brandon M. Scott has no abstentions. The Honorable President Nick Mosby has no abstentions. The Honorable Comptroller Bill Henry is abstaining on all travel requests and travel reimbursements. City Solicitor Ebony Thompson has no abstentions to note this morning. And Director of Public Works Khalil Zaid has no abstentions to note this morning. And I believe our city administrator, who's sitting in for the mayor, also has no abstentions to note this morning. We have the following no votes to note for the record. These are votes, no votes on items that are appearing on the routine agenda. The Honorable President Nick Mosby will be voting no on the following items. SB 2414331, Department of Housing and Community Development, condemnation of 1622 East 29th Street, payment of settlement. SB 2414180, Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs, ARPA First Amendment to Grant Agreement with Enoch Pratt Free Library. SB 2414351, Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, Agreement, North Avenue and Hilton Street Business and Community Task Force Incorporated. SB 2412999, Procurement, First Amendment to Agreement with Sparks Quality Fence Company. SB 2414401, Recreation and Parks, Award for RP 23802, Bocheck Gym Edition. SB 2414221, Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs, Grant Agreement with Healthy Neighborhoods, Inc., and SB 2413991, Department of Housing and Community Development, Fixed Pricing Dispositions, October 2024. Mr. President, that concludes our opening statement for this morning.
Thank you so much, Madam Clerk. At this time, I'll ask for a motion to approve and adopt the opening statement.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The opening statement has now been adopted. I now would like to direct the board's attention to a memorandum from my office dated November 18th, 2024, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items together with any corrections, additions, abstentions, and no votes that our amazing clerk has read this morning. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve all items contained on the routine agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The routine agenda has now been adopted. The first item on our non-routine agenda can be found on page 2, SB 2414433, Department of Audit. This request is to note the biennial performance audit of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood and Safety Engagement for fiscal years ending in 2022 and 23. On behalf of the Audit Department, we have
Good morning, Mr. President, City Administrator, Comptroller, honorable members. My name is Josh Pash. I'm City Auditor, and I am here to present the biennial performance audit of Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. Today, I will go over our audit objectives and scope, the identified risk types, our audit methodology, some background information, and our finding. Audit objectives and scope. Our objective was to evaluate the effectiveness of internal controls over Safe Street program expenditures. Our scope was fiscal years 23 and 22. We extended our scope into fiscal year 24 as other matters, procedures, and transactions outside of our original scope period were reviewed to understand and verify information during our audit period. The identified type risks that we identified here, there was 3 major risks: compliance risk, financial risk, and fraud risk. Audit methodology. So we interviewed key individuals from Muncie and conducted walkthroughs to obtain an understanding of the expenditure reimbursement process and a validation process to make sure that accurate reimbursements were made to subrecipients. That will be noted in finding 1. We interviewed key individuals from subrecipients and conducted walkthroughs to obtain understanding of expenditure invoicing approval process. I want to note that we went out to the subrecipients because subrecipients also have a requirement to have internal controls set up, and we looked at their controls related to our audit objective. No exceptions were noted there. We identified related risks and evaluated design of certain internal control processes and procedures to approve the expenditure reimbursement request by subrecipients. That will be noted in finding 1. We judgmentally selected samples, reviewed and analyzed supporting documentation to validate that only allowable expenditures were approved and reimbursed by Muncie, and validate the payroll expenditures reimbursed were appropriate. That will be noted in finding 1. We observed how the subrecipient processes payroll in their systems. No exceptions were noted. We also observed how Muncie processes subrecipient invoices in the city's financial system, which is now Workday, and that will be noted in finding 1. For our samples, we looked at 100 invoices for expenditure testing and 271 timesheet entries. Those samples were from fiscal year 22, fiscal year 23, and fiscal year 24. Number 7, we interviewed key individuals from Muncie and accounts payable to gain an understanding of the potential causes of the duplicate payments, which I will refer to when I go through the findings. That will be noted in finding 1. During our auditing, we reviewed contracts with subrecipients. During our review, we noted that there were 6 names listed on the approved budgets of certain subrecipient contracts. We also noted that those individuals were never employed by the subrecipients. During our audit procedures, we did not find any instances where the city was billed for those names and listed. And since our objective was related to the expenditures and none of these were billed, we went and referred these names to the Baltimore City Inspector General. Next slide. Okay, to give some background information, the Muncie was established in December of 2020 to lead citywide efforts in addressing crisis-level gun violence. They use an evidence-based approach outside of traditional law enforcement. They have funding from local, state, and federal and philanthropic sources, and their approach is using community outreach, public education, conflict mediation, and violence interruption within specific geographic areas. Next slide. For some more context, we pulled this from the Safe Streets Baltimore Annual Report. In 2023, they had 1,599 conflicts, and they resolved 1,453 conflicts, or 90%. And that information was pulled from the Safe Streets Baltimore Annual Report from January of 23 to December of 23. Next slide. Okay, subrecipients. Subrecipients in this program are community-based organizations, and they are used to manage the Safe Streets sites through contractual agreement with the city, Muncie. During fiscal year 22, there were initially 8 subrecipients with 1-year contracts, and those are listed here. Next slide. During the first half of fiscal year 23, that number was reduced to 7 recipients overseeing the 10 Safe Street sites. In the second half of fiscal year 23, the program transitioned to the following 2 subrecipients, each with a 3-year contract. And those were LifeBridge Health Center and Associated Catholic Charities. And those are the 10 sites listed. Also, for context, we wanted to show the increase in expenditures over 3 years. So this is the amount spent by ACC and LifeBridge. Next slide. Okay, our findings. Our first finding is that Muncie's monitoring controls to substantiate the validity of subrecipients' reimbursement requests are not working effectively. We noted that Muncie has monitoring controls to verify the subrecipients' expenditures are allowable within the period of payment and within the approved budget. However, we found that these controls are not consistently working effectively. The results that we have were for fiscal year 22 through fiscal year 24. We found duplicate payments were made. We also find that time billed for staff from subcontractor staff were not supported by the subrecipients' logs of daily activities. And I'll get into more detail. Next slide. Okay. Duplicate payments were not identified. We identified 3 duplicate payments totaling $290,000 for 3 invoices, and those were in 23 and 24. We noted $79,000 in July of 22, an invoice for $149,000 in May of 23, and an invoice for $61,000 in January 24. When we dug deeper and we spoke to the subrecipient, they said that they had sent these invoices into the city system because Muncie had not processed the payment. We did identify that all these duplicate payments were recovered by the city. Next slide. Okay, we looked for the causes of duplicate payments. So number 1, the subrecipient emailed the invoices dated February 2024 to the Department of Accounts Payable twice. This is just one of the examples. And I mentioned before that the subrecipient had stated that they sent it in twice because their first one had not been processed. We noted that Ancora failed to detect duplicate invoices. Ancora is one of the IT systems that is used to process an invoice that is sent in. So it is one of the systems that's used to convert a PDF invoice to the invoice as it's in Workday. So the invoice will come in as a PDF. It'll go through an optical character reader. It'll go through Ancora, and then it'll go through Core Integrator, and then make its way to Workday. Core Integrator was a component of the former financial system that the city used, and they continue using it while transitioning to Workday. It was phased out in September of 2024. AP personnel reviewed and approved the invoices in that process, and then when AP created the invoice in Workday, the supplier invoice number had slight variations. Workday should have caught it if the invoice number was the same. However, because of that slight variation in the invoice number, Workday did not catch it. Once AP had finished entering it in, those invoices were routed in Workday to Muncie for approval, and the Muncie control of matching invoices to Workday receipts were circumvented. Muncie has a good control that once they reviewed an invoice or a receipt for goods services from the subrecipient, they create a receipt in Workday. When the invoice is routed through accounts payable, there should be a receipt to match it to. When, in these cases, when there was not a receipt matched to, it should have prompted further investigation. However, Muncie continued processing the invoice, and therefore the duplicate invoices were paid. I want to note that we are working with accounts payable and Baltimore City Information Technology to obtain an understanding of the Workday invoice processing and Workday system controls to see if there are ways that that would be a mitigating control. And if that's the case, what is holding it up and how to fix that process. And then we noted that Muncie did not have a process to track all payments made, which they would be able to use to identify duplicate payments. Okay, Section 2, the Muncie did not consistently validate daily activities of subrecipient employees. From July of 21 to January of 24, Muncie made an estimated reimbursement of $257,000. This was based on our calculation and is only an estimate to subrecipients without validating the daily activities of the subrecipient employees. We noted 180 of 271 samples, those are time entries, or 66%, were not validated. The cause. So subrecipient employees, and we looked at the titles of site director, site supervisor, and violence interrupter positions. They are required to record their daily activities, including their paid time off, in Cure Violence, and that was replaced by the Apricot system. However, the subrecipient employees were not always entered into these systems for the days that were billed to the city. Muncie has outreach liaisons, 2 of them, who rotate between the 10 sites daily. They monitor each of the Safe Street sites to make sure that they are operating according to the program's mission and operating manual. The liaisons review subrecipient input into the Apricot management system to validate the data is entered timely and accurately. They provide technical assistant training to the subrecipient staff to make sure that they understand their roles and responsibilities and how to record information into Apricot. The liaisons have access to these systems, and they use the systems to monitor operations of the subrecipients and verify that daily entries are made by the subrecipients. And then Muncie managed personnel supervise these liaisons to confirm that the liaisons are performing that requirement. Next slide. Part 3. The Muncie consistently reimbursed payments without validating payroll records. The Muncie does not require subrecipients to submit a payroll register. We noted that one of the 2 subrecipients does submit a payroll register. Additionally, we observed that Muncie does not confirm the accuracy of aggregate totals in the invoice. They don't make sure that the totals all add up, and there's no secondary review of invoices prior to payments. A payroll register lists the employee name, the pay period, and the amount of salary charged to the Safe Streets program. And to validate those payments to Muncie, payroll registers are used to validate the amount billed. And therefore, there was a general ledger detail of what was charged by the other subrecipient, but it did not include employee names and wasn't sufficient enough to actually use to validate that the employees that were being billed were supported. The cause is Muncie relies heavily on the subrecipient internal controls, which I noted in the beginning that we did review some of those controls. Recommendation. We recommend Muncie keep a schedule of approved reimbursement payment requests and check whether the payment was already made when a new payment requests are submitted by the subrecipients. We recommend that they enforce the control of matching receipts to invoices and Workday. We recommend that they validate the daily activity log of subrecipient employees in the Apricot system, which is part of their process already. We recommend that they validate salaries to pay registers, which they're doing with one of the subrecipients. We recommend that they recalculate the invoice totals to confirm accuracy of the total amount billed. And we recommend that they establish a secondary review process for invoice review before those payments are approved. I would like to thank our audit team, Muncie, the subrecipients and accounts payable for everything and all their assistance in completing this audit, and I will take any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Arter. At this time, Mr. Comptroller, do you have some questions?
I do, and I want to start by, both thanking the city auditor and his team, and also I'm going to apologize to him because he makes a point of showing me his presentation in advance, so if I have any silly technical questions, I don't have to waste the board's time on it. But I missed something before, which was in finding 2, the reimbursements that were listed were from July 1, 21 through January 31st, 24. And I just wanted to check why that ending date is later than the scope of the audit as a whole.
So often when we're doing an audit and the processing controls have changed, we would like to evaluate those so that we're not getting a finding that was already resolved.
Okay. All right, thank you. That was my.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Madam CAO?
Sure, thank you. First, thank you, sir, for your work on this particular audit. A couple of technical questions I want to make sure that I understand. Can you confirm the number of duplicate payments or duplicate invoices that you all identified?
3.
3, okay. And following the 3 out of 100, what were the total number of invoices that you all reviewed as a part of this audit?
I'd have to get back to you on, okay, so the invoices we looked at, there was 100.
Okay, yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. And they span 2022, 2023, and 2024?
Correct.
Okay. And then can you confirm that of those duplicate invoices that were processed, that the city ended up recouping the payment? And
Correct.
can you talk about how the city recouped the payment? At what step in the process did the city recoup the payment?
So we had spoken to the subrecipient, they had identified that those payments had been made, and then they worked with Muncie to submit the reimbursement.
Got it. Okay. And can you, you mentioned Encora. Who uses Encora? Who processes through Encora?
So the accounts payable process is an invoice will be sent in the city that will be routed to accounts payable. It goes through a number of step process. Oftentimes the invoice is a PDF document. So then that document will have to be scraped to get the data off it. Encora is used to pull those different data fields, and then those are sent into the core integrator. Currently, they are being sent through accounts payable directly into Workday. And so that system is reviewed by accounts payable, that information, and then that data is checked for errors, typos, and stuff like that before it's go ahead and put into Workday. It's basically one of those intermittent systems to transfer from a PDF to get the invoice into Workday.
Got it. Can you walk us through, if you are able to, just the invoice process itself? So a subrecipient sends in their invoice. They send it to Muncie. Muncie then reviews it for accuracy, sends it to accounts payable. Accounts payable then pays out that invoice.
Right. So in this case, and often with the city, an invoice will be supported by lots of supporting documentation. There could be invoices attached, receipts attached, payroll records attached, and those will be sent to the agency for them to make sure that everything agrees, ties out, and applies to the program. Separately, because of segregation of duties, the vendor, subrecipient submits the invoice through a portal that goes directly to accounts payable. So segregation of duties would be the city has a purchase order which is telling us and the vendor what we want from them. Then there'll be a receipt where the city agency makes sure that what we actually order for the purchase order was actually received. So if we order, I'd say 100 items, but they only deliver 90, the receipt would say receive 90. And therefore, we're only going to pay 90 because that's when we receive. So in the case of services, in this case, they would say the invoice amount was $150,000. They would receive that supporting documentation, work with the subrecipient if anything is not valid, everything checks out. They would create a receipt in Workday that says we received $150,000 of services. So that is put into Workday as a separate component. That is the agency saying we received the goods and services. Then the vendor or subrecipient will send via a portal the invoice to accounts payable. They go through that process of getting the data off of it. So that just has information. Once accounts payable has it in Workday, it is routed to the agency to say, did you receive this? And there should already be a receipt saying they received it, and then they would just match that up, and then you have your three-way match, you have your purchase order, you have your received goods, and you have your invoice, which is by the third party to pay.
Got it. Thank you. And then one last question. So for the internal controls, essentially through this process, there should have been internal controls on both Muncie and on the accounts payable side that would have caught the duplicate invoices, and both of those internal controls did not work in this instance.
Correct. And like I said, we're working with accounts payable and Baltimore City Information Technology to find out if there are ways to close that gap.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam CAO. Are there any additional questions or concerns from members of this board for the Audit Department? Hearing and seeing none, thank you so much, Mr. Auditor. At this time, Monty, would you like to come up and speak to the board?
Good morning. And I know we have a presentation. I believe Cassidy Anderson should be sharing it. Right. Good morning, Board. My name's Stephanie Mavronis. I serve as the Director of MONSE. First, I want to say thank you to the audits team. Over the course and the months that we worked together on this audit, we've taken the approach that we're looking for room for improvement. We're looking for opportunities to strengthen our operation, and that's something that we've been able to accomplish as we've worked through this audit process. Going to the next slide, please. Okay, so just to start, and then I'll walk through the status of implementation of the recommendations you heard the city auditor share. We accept the city auditor's findings and are committed to accountability and improving internal financial systems and contract oversight agency-wide. The findings did highlight room for improvement in our administrative oversight and financial management. While this is an agency issue, I do want to say this should in no way take away from the important work that our Safe Streets team does on the ground each and every day. But it's also important to note that our review of this information, reviewing invoices, contracts, payments, corroborated what the city auditor also found, that there were no identified instances of fraud. So we've taken immediate steps to make changes and address process gaps to prevent issues or potential issues that have been identified from ever happening again. We can go to the next slide just to walk through these recommendations. So out of the 6 recommendations that came from the city auditor, there are 4 that we've already implemented over the course of the audit, largely in the realm of improving our internal record keeping and financial controls over this period of time. And through identifying some staffing gaps in our agency, we've also effectively overhauled our city's finance lane to ensure that we have the appropriate oversight needed. So at this time, by the beginning of October, we have implemented a schedule of approved reimbursement payments requests. We have the process in place now to check and ensure payments were not already made before we process new payment requests. We are enforcing the control of matching requisitions to invoices in Workday. We are validating salary billed to payroll registers, and where supporting documentation was not provided in the most robust sense for subrecipients before, we're ensuring that that documentation is appropriate moving forward. We've also established a secondary review process of invoices, so making sure that we have a programmatic review to ensure the work was completed as needed, but we also have a fiscal review to do the simple things like retotaling the invoice and making sure nothing on there is out of sorts. For the 2 items that are in progress, the first is the validation of the daily activities log of subrecipient employments in the Apricot system. So as the city auditor mentioned, not every position in Safe Streets, but most of our positions are required to complete daily logs in the system. I will say, given that we provide direct technical assistance to Safe Streets, that's not the only way we know whether or not someone was working. We participate and co-produce events. We are on the ground with our teams. We see who is working. We see what mediations are entered. But we are working right now with our community violence intervention team to ensure that this is just an additional check that we can have on the process as we're working closely with our subrecipients. We may be able to implement this sooner, but we've set a date of mid-April to ensure that this part of the process is fully incorporated. On the 5th recommendation, which you see here at the bottom of the slide, the recalculation of invoice totals, this is something that we've already implemented since it was raised as we move forward, but we are taking the extra step of going back to make sure we're doing our due diligence, that any prior invoices that were processed have been recalculated, and if we notice anything that is not appropriate, that we can address that with the subrecipients. That's why I've marked it as in progress, but do want to say we've implemented this as we move forward. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Madam Director. Just one quick question. From your knowledge or background, is the activities log for other organizations or agencies or relationships of subrecipients, is that a standard practice throughout the city? Do you know of?
I'm not aware of that for other programs. I know it is a practice that's carried over from Cure Violence, which is the underlying model of the Safe Streets program.
I just raised that concern. Like, obviously, I am supportive of it, but I guess some concerns that I have is at times there's an inherent a view of Safe Streets of fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption that I would say that, how this audit report is just kind of very focused on kind of the interactions between invoices and time log. But I think it's an indication of the level of work and commitment that you guys have been doing, and almost the sanctity of it as it relates to really tough work under a tremendous amount of scrutiny. And I say that to say, to the city, that, if we're going to require, Safe Streets to do this, and again, I'm supportive of it, we should ensure that we're requiring other sub-recipients of other types of grants to kind of do the same thing. There's no secret there's a correlation of the background of the individuals that work on a daily basis to help protect our communities and help drive down violence in our city, and that some of them wear a scarlet letter of being past folks involved in the criminal justice system with criminal transgressions. I think it's critical for us to ensure that, again, because of that, we're not putting additional stipulations or policies or procedures over their heads that is different than those that we put on other grantees. So I say that, and I appreciate kind of your background and your experience on it. I just wonder, from an auditor's perspective, knowing that this was one of the findings, is that something that we typically see that maybe we weren't doing in Safe Streets, but we require all other entities that have subrecipients that are set up this way to do the same thing?
In our audits, we have not noted this process of looking at daily entries by the subrecipient or the staff. This was the first time. And then this was actually a control process set up by Muncie, and our audit looks at those controls. Does that answer your question?
Yes. I guess it just, again, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, ensuring that we're not applying some level of standards for this important work that we're not doing for other important work. So I'll just ask the board to kind of take that up in the future for other for other evaluation of other entities similar to this. And again, if it's good for Muncie to do, it should be good for us to do citywide.
Can I make one correction to what I said before?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sorry. City Administrator?
Yes.
The reimbursements from the subrecipients, they were not paid back to the city. They were netted against future invoices.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yep.
Yeah.
And can,
Madam CEO?
yes, I just wanted to, I want to thank you, Mr. Council President, for your note about the daily activity logs, and to note what I believe to be a best practice in federal standards. So when we do our single audit, all of the agencies we review, or the auditors actually review the time sheets and the time records of employees. They don't go through and do a daily activity log review. But to the auditor's point about this being a standard process within Muncie, I understand why the auditor looked at the daily activity log, but a best practice generally and how we see most of our grants monitored is actually through payroll records and not through actual daily activity logs in a system.
Yes, and definitely supportive and understand that, Madam CEO. I just want to make sure that we're not putting, certain standards over Muncie with the level of scrutiny that they've received, consistent scrutiny that they've received, and I think through the findings of would be an error rate of 3%, that we were able to go back and they had the appropriate records to correct it, we should just be applying this across the board. Anything else, Madam Director? Mr. Comptroller?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I just have sort of a follow-up question to the President's. Aside from the daily activity log issue, how is Muncie working with subrecipients to ensure that their internal controls are as good as possible to prevent them from providing potentially problematic information to you, or to in any way prevent future unverified or inaccurate reimbursements?
So working with our subrecipients, I would say even over the past 6 months, we've taken some steps to huddle with them, make sure that they understand moving forward the standards that we need to see when it comes to reimbursement, and just the threshold that we're going to continue to enforce as far as our record keeping, supporting documentation, all of that. We work closely both with the management level of our subrecipients. They have the ability to also see within the system, for example, what kind of data is being entered by their staff. And so that might be daily logs, that might be mediations. I know one of the things that we've had to continually troubleshoot, and you mentioned, Council President, like we're talking about people who have backgrounds, maybe different levels of technological know-how. We deal with simple things like people getting locked out of their account and they maybe weren't able to submit something for a number of days. This is where our staff comes in and is actually on the ground with the staff of that subrecipient, and we're consistently reporting back what we see, potential issues that we identify that we want to address with our subrecipients before they grow into something. We have a very open dialogue with them. So we want to make sure that the work is happening, but we know that most of the work that Safe Streets does is not going to be at a computer at a desk. They're out canvassing the community and they're coming back, and we want to make sure that they are getting credit for the work that they're doing. So again, that's something that with our CVI team and new leadership that we've onboarded, that we're really prioritizing to make sure our Safe Streets staff can get credit effectively for the work that they are doing, and that we have multiple ways to verify that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And again, thank you for your leadership. Again, under a tremendous amount of scrutiny consistently, but performing at an extremely high level based off of the results that we saw in this audit today. And I hope the media reports on that. Thank you so much. At this time, any additional questions or concerns from members of this board? Madam CAO?
Just one more. I just want to make sure that we note this for the record. When the audit started, how many subrecipients were there?
So if the audit started, to look at fiscal 22 and 23, we started with the 8 subrecipients who had 1-year terms and now have 2 subrecipients.
Okay, and can you talk a little bit more about why we made the move from 8 to 2?
There were a number of reasons. I would say we started off the term with a clear mandate from the mayor to evaluate and strengthen the Safe Streets program, and so that's the work that we've been doing. One of the things that came up was that we had a number of subrecipients, 8 at that time, each who had different ways of operating the program, each who could provide different levels of support, and we had a few of those original subrecipients who said, you know, we've done strategic planning, operating Safe Streets long-term is not a part of our vision, we love the work, but we need to move on. So this was both about making sure we had community-based organizations who were connected to this ecosystem, but also making sure that, you know, we are looking for efficiencies in how we contract. Executing 8 contracts for 10 Safe Street sites is a challenge, and making sure that all of our staff have access to the same wraparound supports, equipment, other things. Having 2 community-based organizations did give us, you know, economies of scale essentially in that way.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. At this time, any additional questions or concerns? Hearing or seeing none from the board, we will note this audit. Thank you, Mr. Auditor, and your team. Madam Deputy Auditor. The next item on our routine agenda can be found on pages 7 and 8, SB 2414250. City Council, this request is to approve a proposed resolution of pilot agreements. On behalf of the Baltimore City Council, we have making a cameo appearance, the man, the myth, the legend.
Good morning, Mr. President, honorable members of the board. My name is Aaron DeGraffenright. I am General Counsel to the City Council. This morning, the board is being asked to approve and adopt a resolution to codify the minimum reporting standards that the board is going to receive for going forward for pilot agreements, as well as that information going to the City Council. We worked with Madam CAO Leach and, DHCD Commissioner Kennedy in the administration to amend the original that got submitted, and Celeste read it into the record today. So that is what we're here to request the board to approve, and we can answer any questions should they come.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. General Counsel. I've been up all night thinking of really challenging and tough questions to throw at this, but you know, I'll let them go. At this time, are there any questions or concerns? Oh, but in all serious note, really appreciate the work from the administration. Obviously, pilots has been a sore topic or huge concern of mine since taking over. when we, provide opportunities for our partners in good faith that are doing development or expansion, particularly as it relates to affordable housing in our community, we want to ensure that the sanctity of those residencies are up to code, up to standard, and anything that we want our family members to live in. And I appreciate this board for particularly the pilot that we had the ability of examining and going and visiting on Pennsylvania Avenue and seeing the conditions that we were about to kind of go down the pathway and approve. So again, I think this is a huge step in the right direction. We would not be here without partnership and commitment from the mayor, as well as all of your leadership and your work, Madam CAO. So in all seriousness, thank you. I'm truly thankful, going out as this is my second to last BOE meeting. I will not have the ability of scrutinizing these pilots anymore, but knowing that, with the teamwork and the partnership that moving forward, we'll be in a little better position to ensure that we're doing our due diligence and leveraging and setting up our citizens for success. With that, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Mr. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm also going to thank you for putting this resolution in. I know this is an issue that you have felt very strongly about for your time on the board, and I have often been supportive of the points you're making, and I am extremely happy to see institutionally the council be more involved in this. I think this is a big city, and running it should involve all of the people that we elect to that point. So I'm glad that the council's going to be taking a larger role. The one question I have, and this is what advice or recommendation does the council have to the Board of Estimates in we're going to be evaluating the history of calls for public safety services. What role do you think that should play in the board's decision on approving or rejecting these pilot agreements going forward?
I guess I can answer that. So I think, obviously having a formal process where now the city council would be able to evaluate and also ultimately charged with evaluating and providing feedback back is critically important for a couple things. The main reason is, the city council member who represents that area is closest to the concern. So be it a public safety, be it an environmental issue, be it just a problematic neighbor or the person that owns the particular development, it now ensures that the council person is kind of also part of the process. I would kind of put this very similar track as like from a liquor license perspective. When there's a change or modification from a liquor license perspective in a certain community, the council is notified because, again, they're closest to the neighborhood association president, the neighbors around there. They understand and know their districts in a way that now, with that, the feedback or recommendation, it's my hope that this Board of Estimates, just like what we saw on Pennsylvania Avenue, would take very serious some of the feedback that we're able to get. If we know that our residents are living without working plumbing, if we know that our residents are having major concerns with the appliances or equipment, if we know that there's some inherent issue with the way the operations of the building is going, particularly for our seniors and public safety, that provides that level of dialogue that's critically important for this board to make that decision. So again, I think this is a step in the right direction, and I definitely appreciate all the work and the participation that we've received from the administration on this.
So sort of from I guess I would call it a legislative intent. Like it's your expectation that the way that this resolution will be implemented will be to create a culture similar to what you just described with the liquor board, where whenever there is one of these pilots, the council person for that district through this will have been fully informed and should be able to come before the board and give the board recommendation either that they should or should not be approving that that pilot, and it would be your hope and expectation that the board would take that recommendation seriously.
Yes, it puts more accountability on the council member who represents that district to speak up, stand up, and be part of the process associated with something that's really important. I mean, look, these are tax dollars that we are leveraging in the name and the guise of affordable housing for our most vulnerable residents in our city. And that should be done in a way where we have all hands on deck to ensure that we're leveraging something that could be a 30, 40-year deal in a way that's beneficial for the current residents and future residents in that particular area. So that is the exact point. And I think it's one point to really note that the council, based off the charter, cannot take the action. So the council can't put in a bill to kind of undo it or kind of change it. It is the role of this board and in the way that the charter is set up to kind of handle pilots this way. So just for folks out there, just from a clarity perspective, want to make sure that we communicated that. Madam CAO?
So, Mr. President, I wanted to take this moment to thank you for your leadership on this issue. You, as the comptroller said, have been the leader and the loud voice on this board that really has partnered with and at times puts this administration on this particular issue. And this is your legacy. I think this is the legacy that you leave for this board and this city, is for us to think critically on matters like pilot agreements, the work around MWBE. And I just want to take a moment to thank you for being that voice and being that sounding board, and then also for being a partner with this administration to say that this is something that we can do together for the betterment of our city. And so just want to acknowledge your partnership around this work. And Aaron, I want to acknowledge your leadership and your partnership around this work as well. And you too, Mr. Comptroller. This is something that this board can be proud that we did together.
Thank you so much, Madam CAO. With that, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none at this time, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item has been approved. Thank you so much, Mr. General Counsel. The next item on the non-routine agenda can be found on pages 106 through 108, SB 2414149, Law Department. This request is to approve a partial consent decree and release of claims between plaintiffs Susan Goodlaxon, Janice Jackson, Kiana Mayo, and Image Center on one hand, and the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore on the other hand. On behalf of the Law Department, we have
Good morning, Mr. Council President, Mr. Comptroller, Madam CAO, members of the board. Stephen Salisbury, Deputy City Solicitor. The Law Department is here today presenting a settlement agreement in resolution of a long-running litigation that was filed about 3 years ago over the state of the city's pedestrian rights-of-way, curb ramps and sidewalks. For a bit of historical context, this really originally dates back to a 2019 survey done by the city's own Department of Transportation that looked at the city's curb ramps and revealed problems with the majority of the curb ramps throughout the city. It also took a look at some of the city's sidewalks, found similar issues. Based somewhat on that survey, a group of plaintiffs, 3 individuals in Baltimore City residents, individuals with disabilities, filed this lawsuit along with the Image Center, a nonprofit, on behalf of all similarly situated individuals in Baltimore City, basically alleging that there were violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act based on the state of the city's curb ramps and sidewalks. Throughout this litigation, the city has acknowledged the longstanding issues with the curb ramps and sidewalks. These are problems that obviously date back many, many years, even before the Americans with Disabilities Act came into law. And that is why, the city never filed any responsive pleadings or anything like that. As soon as the lawsuit was filed, the parties submitted to mediation to really not so much answer the question of whether or not there were issues with the sidewalks and curb ramps, but what could the city reasonably do to make improvements and what sort of investment could the city commit to, given, not only, limited resources, but also practical challenges with just how much of this work can be done in a short period of time. Ultimately, the parties agreed to the framework that is before this board today, and I'll speak a little bit about the terms of that. I'll go through the terms of that now. There's both monetary and non-monetary components to this settlement agreement. Starting with the monetary components, the city, under this agreement, has made a commitment to, over the next 4 years, invest approximately $44 million into a pedestrian right-of-way program. So these are improvements that will go to both the curb ramps and the sidewalks. It's split out over the fiscal years 25, 26, 27, 28, with $8 million in the first year and then $12 million in the ensuing 3 years. There's another provision about if additional highway user revenue funding comes from the state beyond what the city anticipated, a certain percentage of that would also go to sidewalk and curb ramp improvements. In addition to the monetary components, there are a series of non-monetary components, largely that will fall on the Department of Transportation to stand up a program for implementing, for actually, putting these resources into effect. That includes appointing an ADA coordinator for the pedestrian rights-of-way to oversee ADA compliance. In addition, the city will implement a program to inspect and document accessibility on a 10-year cycle moving forward in with the state of the pedestrian rights-of-way. Another big part of this is looking at obstacles in the pedestrian rights-of-way. It's not just the state of the sidewalks and the curb ramps. A number of these have issues like light poles, fire hydrants, mailboxes, utility obstructions that we'll need to look at to make sure how to remove those and ensure that all the sidewalks and curb ramps are accessible. Ultimately, this is a settlement that requires the city to invest $44 million. The scope of the problem of ultimately fixing all of the city's sidewalks and curb ramps is going to cost a lot more money than $44 million, and the parties have known that, and that's why this is only a 4-year agreement. Under the terms of the agreement, in 3 years from now, the parties will return to negotiations and evaluate further investment in future years to ultimately look at bringing the city's sidewalks and curb ramps into compliance. I want to make a couple last points just to say, obviously these issues, are historical in nature. They date back a long time, as really as reflected in that 2019 study. But over the ensuing years, the city, and under this administration, the city has made really leaps and bounds in terms of the amount of money and investment that go into sidewalks and curb ramps. There has been tremendous progress already made that will really just be the foundation for this investment to then come on top of. As a reference point, just talking to the Department of Transportation before the hearing this morning, they had, were explaining how just this year to date, there have already been 512 curb ramps installed in the city, which is one of the highest amounts that they've had in several years, and that's before the $8 million in the settlement agreement that is going to come into place. And I think it's just reflective of how much improvement the Department of Transportation has already made in how they deal with sidewalks and curb ramps. Again, that's just the floor. This is going to build on that and really ultimately the idea is to build out a program in DOT to more regularly, lead to, a much more accessible sidewalks and curb ramps and across the pedestrian rights-of-way throughout the city. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Thank you so much, Deputy Solicitor. At this time, are there any questions or concerns from members of this board? Ms. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Well, it's not a question, and I don't even know if I would call it a concern. But first of all, I want to express my thanks to the Law Department for working on this matter. This is a tough one because what the plaintiffs are asking is that we do what we're supposed to do. And so I guess the main comment I want to make is how, despite the size of this settlement, unlike so many of the settlements that come before us, this is not the city trying to make good to someone that we've, injured or hurt in some way. But we appreciate the plaintiff's efforts in the sense of this is a way of making sure that we do what we should have been doing. And now we have a plan to do what we are supposed to do for at least 4 years. When you say, I guess I will have a question, which is when you come back to reevaluate in 3 years, is there the expectation that this settlement will be renewed, or is the expectation that if we appear to be making good progress, the parties may trust us to just continue to make good progress?
So the idea of the partial settlement, of the partial consent decree, was basically that when we initially talked about this, it was looking at a potentially 25-year settlement agreement. And,
We're going to spend $600 million,
right.
Yeah.
And part of the issue with that is, as I think everyone, members of the board will appreciate, projecting out 20 years from now what the city's financial situation is going to be, how much a curb ramp is going to cost, all those things are very difficult to project out at that length. And that's why sort of breaking it into smaller pieces, made more sense. What is, under the terms of the partial consent decree, after 3 years, the parties will return and can negotiate whatever the future years are going to be. I mean, I think it's very possible that what's currently in place will be a baseline to, that the parties can build on. Whether it'll be a continuation of what's already going on, that'll be for the parties to negotiate. I would say that, again, part of the idea here is this is what the administration is doing now is something that it has never done before, which is really build out a program. And that's why this first 4-year period is really about getting the pieces in place to really see how much of this work can we do, how quickly can we do it, how much more efficiently can we do it. So I think at the end of that period, it will be, reevaluating where we stand and what's realistic. I think that, ultimately the goal is for the city to be in 100% compliance with all of its pedestrian rights of way, which is, again, is going to be a substantial lift. But that's what, we'll be returning to the negotiating table to look at what, what's realistic, what we can do, and learning from what we will have done at that point over the preceding 3 years. Okay. And I just another comment or another response to what you said is, again, I couldn't emphasize that enough, that unlike so many of the settlements that we find ourselves bringing before this board, it's really important to note that this is going into the city. This is an investment in the city that no mayor before has made into the ADA accessibility and into really improving and making as accessible as possible all of the city's pedestrian rights of way. So that is why this is exciting. It is overdue. It is something that, obviously we were, it was never a question of whether we were going to, build out a program like this. It was really just about making sure that we were doing so in a way that setting out obligations and commitments that the city would be able to meet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Madam Solicitor, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. And just to further expound on the answer to your question, Mr. Comptroller, completely agree with everything you said, Deputy Solicitor. I just wanted to really point out the importance of the practicality of doing this, because the mayor, the administration wanted to do this. This has been filed 3 years ago, and we thought it was important for us to actually get a concrete plan because of the value that the mayor puts on this and the value that this is to the city. But the practical part about even if we had all of the funds that we wanted to do, literally tearing up a street and making it not usable for anyone while we're doing this work, right? You have to factor that in. And we looked at other municipalities that have entered sort of into these agreements, and they may have been a lot more robust, but we're trying to learn from some of those mistakes there where they've committed to that because they wanted to do it, but then the practicality, they are not able to do it. And the mayor wanted to ensure that this was something that we could deliver on and to prioritize. And then I also just wanted to say the importance of this 4 years. as we are doing developments in different projects and all of the development and infrastructure projects that are going on in the city, we need to be able to communicate a lot better with each other, because there are things that we are doing outside of new developments that would count for what we're doing here. So as we ramp up and as we get into the rhythm of us communicating better all of the different projects that are going on to really see what we can do in terms of optimizing our performance on these, I think that's very important. And I think this 4 years gives us that window and that opportunity to really be efficient and see what we can do, and then make when we come back to you, have a better sense of what our capabilities are to really make lasting changes here. And I can't emphasize enough how important this is, and how this is the first time and the greatest investment that any mayor has made on this issue, because of the importance to this administration on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Solicitor. Any additional questions or concerns for the Law Department? Hearing and seeing none, it's time to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. Thank you so much, Deputy Solicitor. The next item on non-routine agenda can be found on pages 159 and 160, SB 2414076, Bureau of Procurement. On behalf of the Department of Transportation, this request is to approve a goods and service contract extension with IPT LLC, doing business as Paylock. On behalf of procurement, we have
Adam Manny, your Chief Procurement Officer. Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Comptroller, Madam City Administrator, Board. Thank you. I'm here today to discuss the extension, the 5th extension for Paylock. This is for services and goods. This is for security. These are the boots that transportation uses for people who are parked illegally and things of that sort. As part of this, if it's okay, I'd like to merge this with the walk-on item that we have, because they go hand in hand.
Yes.
The first I want to say is the Department of Transportation did everything that they were supposed to do, and the items that you'll be hearing about really fall on procurement. And the Department of Transportation issued a solicitation, asked us to work for them in our old system, CityBuy, and the solicitation was issued and it was moving forward. The solicitation was never moved from CityBuy into our current system, Workday. So we did receive the bids, which is what we're asking you to reject as part of the walk-on. We did go through the process. Unfortunately, the procurement officer who was working on this passed away suddenly and without notice. This all became out of sight, out of mind. Unfortunately, it went away. All of the bids that are there are way out of the range that we ask people to hold their prices. They're over 2 years old. The scope of work is 2 to 3 years old now. We do have, and we have been working with DOT on updating the new scope and putting a new solicitation out to get these goods and services. But to make sure that we don't run out of these items, we're asking the board to do a 5th extension for this contract, which would get us through October of '25. We don't expect to need all of that time. We expect to go through the new solicitation process with the updated scope and come back to the board for an award of a new contract, be it to this company, the incumbent, or another company, and then we would then move away from the extended one. We have taken, since this has come about in BOP, we have been looking at this. We have been implementing items to make sure that this doesn't happen again. We are looking at project management software to understand where everything is, and we are also starting our preliminary investigation on contract management software to make, as we continue to hire contract administrators, not just to follow the contracts, but to tell the entire procurement story. And once we have everything set, we can then go back and look at all of the old files that we have and have those digitized and entered so that we're moving into the 21st century. So we are taking this as seriously as we can to move forward.
Thank you so much, Mr. CBO. Quick question. I would assume that it was a lot easier for us as a city, from a procurement perspective, to just like fumble along through the existing bid that was out there and then try to recreate or correct on the back end for a new bid moving forward. What we decided to do, what you decided to do, is ensure that we get the process right. That's why you're coming from the board today. Ask for this particular extension, and that way we can be confident in the bid that we put forth and the responses that we get back to appropriately handle that. Is that
correct.
accurate?
Yes, sir.
Are there any questions or concerns? Mr. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, I just want to follow that line of thought to the logical extreme, because you were talking about digitizing past records. As we move towards e-bidding, if we get to the point where, I'm sorry, that was when we get to the point where we are receiving all of our bid documents electronically, that would mean there wouldn't be a need for further digitization. You only will have to digitize the paper that you already have.
That is correct.
Okay. Do we have an idea of how much longer it will take us to identify an e-bidding system so that we can prepare the vendors for the fact that there will be a point where they will have to be using this?
The short answer is no. We are looking at it. We're looking at our current systems with Workday. As part of what we've done is we've been doing a functional review with the Workday people and our Accenture partners to see where, as from the initial implementation, where we can do better, where we can gain efficiencies. We've had 3 or 4 4-hour meetings with them. They are now in the point where they're processing all of it, and they'll be giving us a summary and recommendations to see how we can move forward. As we look at the contract management system, if we do it, we want to make sure that we can expand it to take e-bidding if we need to. If we can't do it with our current systems, if we need to expand it. We're not looking for a system for just today. We're looking for a system that if we need to expand it in the future and tomorrow in 3 or 4 years, that we're planning ahead, not just responding to the problem.
Right.
But we want to make sure that we can get the contract management issue in, that we can do e-bidding like you, I know it's a big item for you and your staff, and to make sure that we don't miss these things again. It's, as I explained to somebody the other day, it's human nature to jump to the end and just come up with the solution, but going through the process is very important to make sure that we don't miss anything and that we are doing the correct thing at the correct time.
We are also believers in making sure that we're going through the process and doing it right. So looking forward to continued progress on this.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. At this time, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, the board will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All,
I'm sorry.
1 second.
Are
Someone
we-
readiness?
Which one are we?
This is the only one that we're on.
We're only on the
SB
fifth extension. Okay.
241476. Mr. CPO, he brought in the one that is tied to it, but we still have to formally call it in on the record. So again, we're going to just take that again. So I'll take a motion.
So moved.
I'm sorry, it's a motion already on the floor. It's been moved and probably second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. Thank you so much. The next item on non-routine agenda can be found on pages 237 and 238, SB 2413343, Department of Transportation. This request is to note an emergency procurement with multiple companies for snow removal services. On behalf of the administration, we have
Good morning, Director Corinne Johnson. Hello, Council President, Comptroller, Madam CA, and honorable members of the board. So for this item, again, this is for emergency procurement for snow removal services. So the September 20th, 2023 advertisement for snow removal services garnered 11 bidders. Of these, only 4 were deemed compliant with the MWBE goals, and BOP recommended that we proceed with the award of these 4. But this is, of course, a safety and time-sensitive procurement, and so it was necessary to proceed with an emergency declaration. And so it was recommended that we add the additional bidders via this emergency declaration. This action, again, was critically necessary to ensure that we have adequate snow removal equipment for the winter. And so the 4 compliant bidders represented only 147 pieces of equipment. And with the additional 7, we were provided with an additional estimated 255 pieces of equipment. We are working with SMBAD and BOP to edit the last RFP and investigating alternative procurement methods, as well as exploring outreach with this target business community in hopes of better results to meet the city's goal of employing small and minority-owned businesses while meeting the city's mission to uphold safety during winter operations. It's just the nature of these type of contracts and the typical bidding approach is not really marrying up. And so we're trying to figure out ways to kind of change up those processes to better deliver these services. So I'll
Thank you.
pause and open up.
Thank you for proactively providing us with the explanation.
Yes.
You know, from, I guess, the role and the competencies of this particular board, that those are the types of questions that we always like to ask.
Yes,
So
sir.
we enjoy when people come with the information to provide to us in advance. The one question I have for you, Madam Director, is there a way to ensure that we prioritize the four that were compliant, that they get that they're at capacity before we go to 5 through 11?
So in reality, most times when we're doing those full activations, we're usually bringing on mostly all of our contractors. So it really is a matter of the size of the contractors, how many pieces of equipment they have, and the type of vehicles they have. So I don't know offhand the numbers that those four have, but I would say that they're not being overlooked or put in the back burner over the others necessarily.
Okay.
But I could look into that a little bit more.
Yeah, and I
But-
guess just, as we go into it and hopefully, we've seen a significant slowdown in the need for snow emergency over the past couple of winters. I haven't seen the Farmer's Almanac for this year, if we are going to be there or not. But I guess the concern is not that they're getting their fair share, but is there a way to prioritize them is what I'm asking to ensure that they're at capacity.
No, understood. Yeah, usually the way it works is that we will have, for activation levels, we might have more skeleton crews, whereas smaller crews, maybe like one or two in each sector. Then we might have more of a city-wide type of activation, so it might be DOT and all the other city agencies where we activate. And then when we do a full activation, it's all the city agencies and typically all of our contractors. So we're not necessarily handpicking or selecting certain contractors over the others.
Okay. I know that this is an issue that's important to you, so I want to say that first. But also, this has been a historic issue in the city of Baltimore. So, anything that you can do in working with Chief Lundy and other folks, please
Yes.
continue to try to push for next winter. Are there any questions for DOT? I'm going to go to Chief Lundy as well. I'm not sure if he has anything to add. Do you guys have any questions for DOT, Madam CAO?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Director. Of the 4 compliant bidders, how many were MWBEs?
Are you, 2?
2 out of 4.
Got it.
2 out of 4.
Thank you. And do we know if of the additional contractors that we brought on through the emergency process, do we know if any of them leveraged NWBEs? Were we able to track that information, or we likely did not?
Good morning, Director Lundy. When we do emergency procurements, they're able to still obviously have the subcontractors and utilize the statements of intent, but we don't do that same pre-bid review where they're required to give us all of that information. So I don't know if we have all of the subcontractor information of who they utilize handy to say specifically the numbers of who they use, but there would have still been participation achieved even though it was the emergency.
Got it. Thank you, sir. And for this board, we obviously worked together on the emergency procurement resolution, and we digitized the emergency procurement process. And a thing that I think we should consider is this MWBE piece. What I want to ensure is that we are not leveraging the emergency procurement process to circumvent the MWBE requirements. And so if there is a way for us to ensure through the emergency process that we're still tracking that information, I want us to make sure that we are building that out.
Yes, so we are still tracking, of course, who is being awarded those contracts. It's just when we're obviously not necessarily making it so that an emergency won't go forward with a non-compliant bidder. Whereas if a formal procurement, everybody would need to achieve that compliance for us to award. And this is one of those circumstances based on the capacity. The DOT had additional needs beyond those that are compliant. But I definitely appreciate your point, and that's something I'd love to move forward with.
Yep. And historically, to the council president's earlier point, this generally happens annually where with this particular contract around snow removal, where we have non-compliant contractors and we still end up doing work with them.
That's correct. So this is something that myself and Director Johnson, we're going to be working as we move into the next RFP to make sure that we're really targeting that community, especially the prime contractor community, to make sure that they are engaging with the MWBEs and even looking at ways that we can bring them, both of those communities and groups together so we can have awareness with the MWBEs and the primes as to what we're trying to achieve and what is required of them to be compliant on the solicitation.
Thank you.
Yeah, and let's be clear, obviously, I don't want to say and just do a broad stroke with all of our vendors or contractors, but many of our folks, they understand and know that, one, this is going to become an emergency because it's a critical need for health, safety of our communities, and they don't necessarily have to comply because we're going to be in this position to kind of need them. So I think that's historically kind of really been where the issue is. I know that with Chief Lundy and Director, you guys will try to develop a solution to incrementally put us in a better position than what we are. But the reality is local, small, minority, and women-owned businesses should be able to turn on a truck and plow a street. And understanding and knowing that the folks that are part of these contracts could help identify and support those local, small, minority, women-owned businesses. So,
and I do just want to raise up along those same lines that we are going to be evaluating in collaboration with DOT how many folks and the extent of the value we need on this contract, because that may give us more flexibility to move forward if we do get to another situation with only those compliant bidders, to make sure that we really are working with folks that are committed to filling out the forms correctly and working with that business community.
Madam CEO?
Yep. And so an additional question. So I don't think this would not require a disparity study at scale.
No.
But have we done an analysis to see the available contractor community or MWBE community that has the ability or capability to do snow removal?
Yes, very much so. So that's what we do each year when we come to this contract. When we look at the scope, we are looking at the current availability of MWBEs. So we do have availability in the marketplace to substantiate the goals that we're setting and also to get folks to engage with those businesses to be compliant. And I think Mr. President hit it on the head that a lot of folks have been reluctant to do that. I think based upon the position you're articulating today, CAO and also the mayor, that this board is not going to want to move forward with the same type of dynamic when we get to next season. So I think the vendors will be taking our position a little bit more seriously in terms of what they need to do to be compliant to get this work.
Yep. And is there work that we can do with the MWBE communities to help them build capacity so that they are able to bid on this contract in the future?
That's something we'll look at as well to really see if there is a fundamental issue. My understanding is there isn't a fundamental issue such as a lack of insurance or bonding that's preventing folks from taking part on these contracts, but that's something we're going to kind of have some sort of forum or open house to really hear from our recent bidders over the last couple of years, their proposed subs and other folks that are certified that could do this work and really bring them together to have a discussion.
Thank you.
See, the unique thing about this contract is it provides an opportunity for folks who essentially can't work because of the snow to actually work. They can utilize their existing trucks, retrofit them with the plow on front of it, and again, plow streets. So that's why, this has historically been an issue. I know that you guys are working it, we'll continue to work it, but I appreciate you proactively bringing that to us and highlighting the concern. And I know between the two of you and the mayor and Madam CEO, we're in good hands for next winter. Are there any additional questions or concerns for members of the board? Hearing and seeing none at this time, this is an emergency, so we'll just note the report. Thank you so much, Madam Director.
Mr. President?
Yes, ma'am.
With apologies for interrupting, I just don't want everyone to be excited that we're about to be on the last item, because we actually need to vote on all three of the walk-ons, and I did not give you those numbers in the opening statement. Apologies.
I got it, B50006437.
And SB 14111 and SB 14314.
14314.
Thank you.
Yep, and 14. We're on the same page, Madam Clerk. Thank you. Madam Clerk, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, the next walk-on item, non-routine agenda is SB 2414640, Bureau of Procurement. This request is regarding a rejection of all bids for B50006437. This is what Mr. CPO talked about earlier, but if you can just formalize for the record your name and where you're from.
Good morning again, Adam Manny. I'm your Chief Procurement Officer.
And you're recommending for us to?
to reject all bids on this as we have just, as your board has just renewed the contract for one more year so that we can put out a new solicitation.
Thank you so much. At this time, are there any questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, at this time, I entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. You said we're good there. We're going for it. Yeah. All right. The next item on our routine agenda is a walk-on item as well as SB 2414314, Mayor's Office. This request is to approve the Elijah Cummings Recreation Center Award. On behalf of the Mayor's Office, we have all of the stars in the building today. I didn't know you were in here.
Yes, sir. Good morning. I'm Reginald Moore, Director, Baltimore City Rec and Parks. Good morning, Council President Mosby, Madam C.A. Leach, Comptroller Hearing, and board members. This will be the award that concludes all the mayor's initial financial commitments to ARPA. This is the last ARPA project. This is the Elijah Cummings Recreation Center. It's a much-needed recreation center that's in southwest Baltimore. This center will be located next door to our Myers Shea facility. And by getting you all's blessing today, we can continue to move this project so that we can make sure that in 540 days, we have a new recreational facility named after Congressman Elijah Cummings.
Thank you so much, Mr. Director. Mr. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
I'm sorry, you said next to the Myers something facility?
So this facility is going to be next door to Myers. We have a large amount of
pavilion?
land. Yes, next door to the indoor soccer pavilion. Yes, sir.
Okay, all
Yes,
right.
sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions or concerns? Hearing and seeing none, at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. The next item on our routine agenda, thank you, Mr. Director, is a walk-on item, is SB 2414411, Mayor's Office. This request is to approve the transfer of funds for Bocheck Recreation Center. On behalf of the administration, we have.
Again, good morning. This is Director Moore, Baltimore City Rec and Parks. So what this is you all approved earlier the award of this contract, but this funding is just the transfer of funds from a reserve account to an active account for Bocheck Recreation Center so that we can fully award and go ahead and move forward PO and get construction started to expand the Bocheck Recreational Center, which will have a new large gymnasium, new fitness area, as well as a new lobby.
What a fun expansion. Are there any questions or concerns from members of the board for the director? Hearing and seeing none, at this time, the board will entertain a motion.
So moved.
It's been moved and probably second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The item is approved. The next item on our routine agenda is another walk-on. It's SB 2414572, Mayor's Office. This request, Family League. We took that off, so we're good. Are there any other additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Madam Clerk, I'm good.
You're good, sir.
All right. At this time, there's no new business before the desk of this board. We will adjourn. The next regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Estimates will occur on Wednesday, December the 4th at 9 a.m. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Baltimore, I absolutely love you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, TV25. Thank you. Welcome to the Board of Estimates bid opening for November 20th, 2024. We have an addenda to share today for one bid opening, Public Works, SC 994, clarifiers and gravity sludge thickeners rehabilitation. I'm trying not to laugh because Abby and I already laughed at that once. The due date was November 20th, and the new opening date is December 4th, 2024. Up first today for the Bureau of Procurement, we have RFQ 643. RAE and RKI gas detection sensors. And there is no bond or anything else I think we're looking for here, Abby.
Correct, yeah. Just the one bidder. That is PG Instrumentation LLC. And that total is 28,980.00.
That number was 28,980.00?
That is correct.
That bidder was PG Instrumentation for $28,980.00. And that was our only bidder for RFQ 643, RAE, and RKI gas detection sensors. Up next, for the Bureau of Procurement, we have RFQ 647, Supply and Delivery of Thermoplastic Pavement Marking Materials.
That is correct. All right, we have one bidder. This is Crown USA Incorporated.
Did you say we had one bidder?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, we'll need to check something after we record this bidder.
Do one. Let's separate it.
I have 4 names here for RFQ 647.
Oh, there's 4. Okay. Okay.
I give you one. Sorry.
No, it's
I
okay.
didn't give you one.
It's okay. It's
Oh,
okay. It's
sorry.
okay.
We're just making sure we're not accidentally opening the wrong bid with the wrong RFQ number. So we do have more than one bidder for
That
this.
is correct.
And again, this is RFQ 647. Sorry, folks, for our confusing little back and forth there. But we have a first up bidder, which is,
Crown USA Incorporated. That total is 2,043, 900.00.
okay, that number was 2,043, 900.00.
That is correct.
That bidder was Crown USA Incorporated for $2,043,900.00.
Up next, we have Enos-Flint, Inc. That total is 15,750.00.
Let me read that number back to you. It's a 15,750.00.
That is correct.
15,000. Okay. Okay, that bidder was Ennis Flint Incorporated for $15,750.
All right.
And you see the same number, yes? It's just the numbers are really different, okay. Up next,
Up next, we have Gaveco Markings, Inc. That total is 1,932,000.
okay, that number was 1,932,000.00.
That is correct.
Okay. And confirmed in the copy?
Holding too many at one time.
That was Gavecchio.
Yeah, 193. It's duplicate. 19320. Yep.
Okay.
These numbers?
I do want to go back and double check Ennis Flint one more time before we record it.
looking. Yeah. It's much smaller.
Okay, and that's the same total in the copies?
Yeah. Same. This is. Yeah. This is
Okay. Just want to be sure we got that right. Okay. And I'll read through all the bidders one more time for folks that are listening, because I know we've been trying to verify here, which doesn't always help folks keep track. And next.
Sorry, this one was weird. It didn't have a bit down. Oh, wait, no, there it is. Okay, cool.
Okay. Up next, we have Ingevity Corporation. That total is 2,092,500.00.
Okay, that number was 2,092,500.00.
That is correct.
And that bidder was Ingevity Corporation for $2,092,500.00. And I'm going to run through that list of bidders one more time. That's Crown USA Incorporated for $2,043,900. Ennis Flint Incorporated for $15,750. Gavecchio Markings Incorporated for $1,932,000. And Ingevity Corporation for $2,092,500. Okay,
Can you read the total one more time
for which one?
Ennis Flint?
Ennis Flint, the number I have is 15,750.00. Okay. Alrighty, up next, we have for the Department of Public Works, ER 4052. This is the Maiden's Choice Tributary Stream Restoration. And this one, I believe, involves a bond, Abby.
Yes, it does.
So, up first.
Up first, we have Monumental Paving and Excavating, Inc. That total is 3,075,000.00.
Okay, that number was 3,075,000.00.
That is correct.
That bidder was Monumental Paving and Excavating for $3,075,000.00. And yes, we have a bid bond. And was there copies or just one original?
There's a,
One original, one duplicate.
Okay. Up next.
up next, we have Triangle Contracting, LLC. That total is 2,681,849.00.
Oh, my key's stuck again. Was there a 6 in the first group of three numbers?
Yes.
81, was it 816?
681.
Okay, that was 2,681,849.00.
That is correct.
That bidder was Triangle Contracting LLC for $2,681,849.00. And yes, we have a bid bond, and we have an original and one copy. And that was our final of two bidders for ER 4052 Maiden's Choice Tributary Stream Restoration. Up next is DPW with WC 1354R Ashburton Washwater Lake Dredging.
The first bidder is the Whiting Turner Contracting Company, Incorporated. That total is 10,798,000.00.
Okay, that number was 10,798,000.00.
That is correct.
Okay, that was the only bidder too, correct? Getting tongue-tied. The Whiting Turner Contracting Company for $10,798,000.00. And yes, we have a bid bond?
Yes, we do.
And do we have an original and copies?
Yes, we do.
One copy?
One copy, one original.
Thank you. And that was our only bidder for WC 1354R Ashburton Washwater Lake Dredging. Up next, we have DPW again with WC 1446 Lock Raven Drive over Rush Brook Culvert, LRD Culvert number 19.
We have Monumental Paving and Excavating, Inc. That total is 717,000.00.
Okay, that number was 717,000.00.
That is correct.
Okay, that bidder and our only bidder for WC 1446 was Monumental Paving and Excavating, Inc. for $717,000.00. And yes, we have a bid bond.
Yes, we do.
And we have an original and one duplicate.
Yes.
Okay, and that again was our only bidder for WC 1446 Lock Raven Drive over Rush Brook Culvert, number 19. Up next for DPW is WC 1449 repaving utility cuts and sidewalk restoration at various locations.
We have Monumental Paving and Excavating, Inc. That total is 7,595,000.00.
Okay, that number was 7,595,000.00.
That is correct.
That bidder was Monumental Paving and Excavating, Inc. for $7,595,000.00. And that was the only bidder for WC 1449, repaving utility cuts and sidewalk restoration at various locations. And was that our final? Yes. Boom. That was our last bid opening for today. So our next bid opening is December 4th, 2024 at 12 noon. And thanks everyone for tuning in, and thank you TV 25.